Morning, my Bible study peeps. We are going to be talking about Luke 20 today. We're continuing from last time. Sadly, you just got me this time. I got no Jennifer. She's at work today, and I am at home. I've done a lot of schoolwork today. I've done a lot of house cleaning. Heck, I'm even currently drying all the camping dishes. So I'm washing all the camping dishes and putting them back up so that's something that she doesn't have to deal with again. Don't even have to think about. It's something that I try to do. There was a thing that I read one time about relationships that said you should always feel like you're doing 60% of the work. You should always feel like you're doing a little bit more of the work in the relationship than you think you should, or of like an even split, because you don't know what the other person's doing for you that you don't know about. So that extra little bit that you're doing makes up for the stuff that you don't know about that they're doing. And I try to do that, and that's what I'm doing today. Cleaning up the house, doing the dishes, cooking dinner, doing everything that I should be doing to put my best foot forward, because that's the one thing I don't want to do. I don't want to get lazy in my marriage. I always want to be trying to date my wife. Anyways, we're going to move into Luke 20. We're going to start in verse 1. I know, unusual, right? Why wouldn't you start in verse 3, 5, 6? It doesn't matter. We're going to start in verse 1 today. Now it happened on one of those days, as he taught the people in the temple and preached the gospel, that the chief priests and the scribes, together with the elders, confronted him and spoke to him, saying, "Tell us, by what authority are you doing these things? Or who is he who gave you this authority?" So Jesus is teaching. He's teaching the gospel, which is literally the good word. Then the chief priests, scribes, together with the elders, confronted him and asked him, "Who gave you this authority?" But Jesus answered and said to them, "I also will ask you one thing, and answer me. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or from men?" Oh, okay. So they asked him, "Whose authority are you teaching this?" And then he's going to ask them a question back. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or from men? Then they responded, the chief priests and the scribes. They reasoned among themselves, saying, "If we say from heaven, he will say, 'Why then do you not believe him?' But if we say from men, all the people will stone us, for they persuaded that John was a prophet." They are persuaded that John was a prophet. So they answered that they did not know where it was from. All right, so let's think about that. They are sitting there talking amongst themselves. If we answer it from men, or if we answer it that his authority came from heaven, he will say, "Why did we not believe him?" Because they got him killed. They got him stoned, right? They didn't believe him. But if we say from men, then the people will stone us, for they were persuaded, or are persuaded, that John was a prophet. So they took a cop-out. They took a cop-out answer. They didn't stand for what they believed, number one. And that is an issue that I have with just people in general. You got to stand what you believe for. If you believe in Jesus, you stand for it, okay? Don't backtrack, don't backslide. Same thing with just simple things. Like if you believe in freedom, stand for freedom. Like these are things you should do. If you believe in gun rights, speak out for gun rights, even when you might get a lot of hate for it around the people you're around at that moment. And I say that because I am in like those high-level school classes where it's very liberal. And I speak out and I'm like, "Hey, look, this may not sound great." Or I don't say it like that. I say, "Hey, you may not like this, but this is how I think. This may not sound great to you, but this is what's up." But someone has to say it. So they didn't do that. And Jesus said to them, okay, so what they said was they did not know where his authority, where John the Baptist's authority was from. And Jesus said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things." Now, if I was in that position and I gave Jesus that crappy answer, and he said, "Neither will I tell you who my authority is from," I'd say, okay, well, is there a way that I can reason my way out of this? Yes, no, maybe so. I'm sure there's a group of people listening. Basically, Jesus just called him out on his bluff. Or their bluff. In a group setting. Man, go Jesus. And that ends that Bible study. Right there, boom. That's the first 8 verses of Luke 20. I wonder what else was happening there. That's something I always think. What was going on? Where were they at? Was it a home? Was it a market? He was teaching people in the temple. So it was in the temple. That's where he was at. So it's happened in the temple in that setting. Interesting. Let's move into verse 9. Now this is going to be the parable of the wicked vine dressers. Beginning of verse 9. Then he began to tell people this parable directly after dealing with the chief priests. So he dealt with them, now he's talking in a parable. Then he began to tell the people this parable. A certain man planted a vineyard, leased it to vine dressers, and went into a far country for a long time. Now at vintage time, he sent a servant to the vine dressers, that they might give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the vine dressers beat him and sent him away empty-handed. Again he sent another servant, and they beat him also, treated him shamefully, and sent him away empty-handed. And again he sent a third, and they wounded him also, and cast him out. So the guy bought a vineyard, got everything going, and then left away for a far land and paid people to come take care of the vines for him. When it's time for harvest, he sends a servant back to get his bounty that he's paid for to be grown and whatnot. They've gotten their pay. It's time to get my grapes, my fruit, my vintage. I don't know. And then they beat the first guy, and they beat and shamed the second guy. So then the owner of the vineyard said, this is in verse 13, "What shall I do? I will send my beloved son. Probably they will respect him when they see him." Oh man, I'm starting to see it now. This is like when Jesus gets sent, the beloved son. "But when the vine dressers saw him, they reasoned among themselves, saying, 'This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, that the inheritance may be ours.' So they cast him out of the vineyard and killed him. Therefore, what will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and destroy those vine dressers and give the vineyard to others." And when they heard it, they said, "Certainly not." Then he looked at them and said, Okay, so now this is kind of Jesus coming back telling the story. Because when the people heard this, they said, "Certainly not." Then he looked at them and said, "What then is this that is written? The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. Ooh. Whoever falls on that stone will be broken, but on whomever it falls, it will grind him into powder." And the chief priests and the scribes that very hour sought to lay hands on him, but they feared the people, for they knew he had spoken this parable against them. So he spoke this parable to the Pharisees. The Pharisees are the people he's talking about. You are the vine dressers. You are the people that God gave his sacred message to, the vineyard, the grapes, growing the grapes. And when he sent his servants to get them, think about like the other prophets, think about John the Baptist, you didn't give it to him. You didn't listen to him. And then when you send Jesus, the beloved son, he's predicting his own death. And then he's saying, what will we do to those vine dressers, those Pharisees? They'll get killed. They will be fallen. And then he talks about the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. Now, hold on. That quotation of the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone, I knew it was a quotation from somewhere. It's a quotation from Isaiah 8:13 through 15, which speaks of Jehovah. Like so many other Old Testament passages, applies to Christ. It proves that he was Jehovah incarnate. What are we going to do to those wicked vine dressers? It's right there in the Bible, man. It's right there in the Bible. The next one we're going to talk about, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? Starting in verse 20. So they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be righteous, that they might seize on his words in order to deliver him to the power and the authority of the governor. So he's got to say something wrong or blasphemous to be taken to the governor. So then the people asked him, saying, "Teacher, we know that you say and teach rightly. You do not show personal favoritism, but teach the way of God in truth. Is it lawful for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" So what they're doing is they're trying to catch him right there and say that it's not lawful to pay taxes to Caesar. That way they can get the Romans on him. Like, hey, he's confronting, disparaging Caesar. Verse 23. But he perceived their craftiness and said to them, "Why do you test me?" He didn't even address the question yet. He said, "Why do you test me? Show me a denarius. Whose image and inscription does it have?" They answered, "Caesar's." And he said to them, Render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. But they could not catch him in his words in the presence of the people, and they marveled at his answer and kept silent. Can you imagine, like, just sitting there thinking, trying to figure out a way to get him, to catch him, trip him up on his words, and every time he just comes back and gets you, every single time, he comes back with something that is Word of God. Like, imagine how frustrating that if you're that person trying to catch him. And I always, I guess, look at it from the other people's perspective, because I can't imagine what Jesus was thinking, because he's God's son, right? Like, I can kind of get in the head of these other people, but like, Jesus knows things that I'll never know, right? He understands it on a core level that I don't think I'll ever be able to get to. I don't think you can, honestly. So that's why I always look at the other people's perspective, because I'm like, whoa, it's literally God sent his son down here, and how are we reacting to that? How are we accepting, rejecting, respecting, understanding God's son right here in front of us as a man? That's crazy to think about. Also, something that's interesting is in the Old Testament time that there was Jewish people that felt like paying taxes to Caesar was like an illegitimate, almost idolatry way of worship, because if you're giving like tithing, okay, to God, is it like we're tithing to Caesar? Is that what these taxes are? Jesus, however, recognizes that there is a separation of that give to God what is God's and give to Caesar what is Caesar's, that you do have responsibilities to the state and to God that are distinctly different, which is interesting. I've never thought about that, because like, whose image is on the money and how much taxes are we paying? I can see how the people would have made that jump back then. That it's kind of idolatrous. That's a big word. That's a $3 word right there. Y'all better write that down. As my wife would say, he's going to be a doctor. Moving to the next bit. Verse 27, talking about the Sadducees' question, what about the resurrection? Verse 27, Then some of the Sadducees who deny that there is a resurrection came to him and asked him, saying, Teacher, Moses wrote to us that if a man's brother dies, having a wife, and he dies without children, his brother should take his wife and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers, and the first took a wife and died without children, and the second took her as a wife, and he died childless. Then the third took her, and in like manner the 7 also, and they left no children and died. Last of all, the woman died also. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife does she become? For all 7 had her as a wife. Interesting, very literal question, right? Because we will be resurrected. We will have a body in Christ. Our bodies will be resurrected. We'll have a spot in heaven. We'll have a heavenly body. This is a good question, okay? However, you're trying to put God things into man's rules, right? We don't know God. Like, God is all powerful. He is all present. He is all knowing. You can't... It's going to sound really bad, but you can't put him into our bottle. It's like how all bourbons are whiskey, but all whiskeys are bourbon. We're trying to force one into the wrong category where we don't really understand it. We don't understand how that's going to work. We can't, right? That's our human brain. Jesus answered and said to them, The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are counted worthy to attain that age and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage, nor can they die any more, for they are equal to the angels and are the sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. But even Moses showed in the burning bush passage that the dead are raised when he called Lord, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. For he is not the God of dead men, but of living, for all live to him. Then some of the scribes answered and said, Teacher, you have spoken well. But after that, they dared not question him anymore. Now, interesting what he just said. Moses showed in the burning bush passage that the dead are raised when he called them the Lord, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, not the used to be God. There's a better way to say that. Hold on. He was using the present tense, God of, not was the God of. but is the God of. That's the key to that passage. I knew there was something about that stuck out. But it's he is the God of. Not was, is. Because these people are alive in the resurrection, right? Right. Ding, ding, ding. I think we have our verse to remember of the day. So we're in Luke 20, verse 38. For he is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for all live to him. Now, Luke's the only one that records that, and this is why I like having this reference Bible, the study Bible, because it gives you the breakdown of these interesting phrases. If not, you got to Google and find, and I still do that sometimes. But here in 2038, all live to him. Only Luke records this phrase. All people, whether departed from their earthly bodies or not, are still living and will live forever. No one is annihilated in death. That right there is it. Okay, so 2038. For he is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for all live to him. Brain, brain, brain. Let's get it down. 2038. That's our verse from this chapter. Continuing in verse 41. And he said to them, how can they say that the Christ is the son of David? Now David himself said in the book of Psalms, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, till I make your enemies your footstool. Therefore David calls him Lord. How is he then his son? So Jesus now turns the tide on the Sadducees and asks them the question. And he said to them, how can they say that the Christ is the son of David? Now David himself in the book of Psalms said this, and this is what it was said in the book of Psalms. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. Then Jesus then says, finish, end quote. Jesus then says, therefore, David calls him Lord. How is he then his son? All right, interesting question. So he turned the table and then asked the Pharisees, not the Pharisees, asked all the leaders the questions. So let's see. Okay, so I'm going to see if we can decipher this here. This is kind of deep, all right? So let's reread the scripture so that we're all on the same page. This is what Jesus said to them. He said, how can they say that the Christ is the son of David? Now David himself said in the book of Psalms, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. Therefore, David calls him Lord. How is he then his son? So how is the son of David also Christ? Now this is what the Reference Bible says. David would not have addressed a merely human descendant as Lord. So this is saying that Jesus being the descendant of David would not address him as Lord. Here, Jesus was not disputing whether the son of David was an appropriate title for the Messiah. After all, the title is based on what is revealed about the Messiah in the Old Testament, and it is used as a messianic title in other verses. But Jesus was pointing out that the title Son of David did not begin to sum up all that is true about the Messiah, who is also the Son of God. This inescapable implication is that Jesus was declaring his deity. All right. Obviously, I need to be a little bit more educated in my Old Testament, okay? And I'm going to be honest, I haven't read the whole Old Testament by any means. I've read the first 4 chapters. But he's declaring his deity. That's what we need to know. He turns to the people gathered and asks them that question. And in that question, he's declaring his deity. And them being scribes would know that. They would know what he's doing in that situation. Okay, so still being in front of the whole crowd, we're going to go and move into verse 45. So what happened there? Let's back it up a little bit before we do that. He's talking to the whole crowd, number one. First, he gets questioned by the Sadducees. What about the resurrection with that story about all the husbands to one wife, who's going to have who? Then he turns around and asks them the question because they go, okay, well, that's cool, man. We're not going to ask you more questions when he responds. All right? And then Jesus asks them that question. And in that question, he's declaring his deity as well. Now, in front of that same group, he turns around to his disciples. And this is what he says in verse 45. Then in the hearing of all the people, so he's, like I said, doing this in front of everyone so they can hear it as well. He said to his disciples, beware of the scribes who desire to go around in long robes, love greetings in the marketplaces, the best seats in the synagogues, and the best places at the feast, who devour widows' houses and for pretense make long prayers, these will receive greater condemnation. Dude, all right. So this is why I enjoy this. When he's saying devour widows' houses, what are we talking about? So I think we can understand when he says beware. Okay, beware of these people. Long robes, that's pretty straightforward. Long flowing cloak that essentially trumpeted the wearer as devout. These greetings or these accolades for these holding these titles of honors. Okay, we got all that. That's pretty self-explanatory. Best seats in the synagogues, also pretty self-explanatory. It is interesting though that the best seats were nearest to where the sacred scrolls were kept. That was where the best seats were. But when he says devour widows' houses, how were these respected religious people devouring widows' houses? Interesting to know. Because they were religious leaders, they were often the estate planners for widows. When there was no one else, they were the estate planner. And being the estate planner, they were able to push this grieving widow into a spot where she would try to give, or she would give more than she should to support the church, right? So this grieving widow lost her husband, and they're taking the husband's legacy away and kind of shunting it to the church. It's not calling out specific reasons or specific examples about that, but that's how they were doing it. That is a situation that not all, right? Not all people are bad. Not all Pharisees are bad, right? I'm sure. But this was a common enough practice for Jesus to call it out. And that's what they mean by devour the widow's houses. They're shunting that money into their own pockets in a way. That's crazy. That's crazy. Beware of the scribes who desire to go around in long robes, love greetings in the marketplaces, the best seats in the synagogues, and the best places at feast, who devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. They will receive greater condemnation. And it's interesting that it says they will receive greater condemnation, because those are the people. Because, like I said, I imagine not everyone was like the worst, right? Not everyone can be the worst. But he's saying those people that are doing that, and you know who you are, you will receive greater condemnation. Jesus laying it down. That's so interesting. And to think, Jesus was doing this all in the temple, right? Because at the very end of the Luke 19, he cleansed the temple. He kicked everybody out. So this is literally right after that where he's teaching in the temple that he just kicked out all of the people that were selling stuff. And then I'm sure the people that were over the temple were like, oh, you're cutting them profits. And then he calls them out multiple times and gets on them as they're trying to question him to then kick him back out of their temple, or to get him out of the temple. But they can't do it because it is the Lord's house. And who is the Lord? Jesus Christ. Wow. That's awesome. All right, so next week we're going to get into 21. And I don't think we have that many chapters until the end of Luke. Luke goes on, so we're in 20 now. It ends in Luke 24. It ends in 24. So I guess we need to figure out where we're going to go from that. We'll see. I don't know if we're going to continue into like John next, or if we'll go into a different chapter in the Bible. We'll just play it out, feel it out, see where we're going. I appreciate y'all for staying around and listening, and I hope you get something from this. If you are actually getting something from this, let me know. Somehow, leave a rating, a review, comment, share with a friend. If there's something you want to hear, that would be cool as well. I would like to throw this out. No, I'm not going to throw that. Let's just focus on sharing this with a friend this week. That's what we're going to do. And if you have any questions, drop me a comment. Seriously, I will try to respond to everything and everywhere, because, we're going to be a worldwide thing. That's it, guys. Remember, always keep your corn on the cob. See you next week. Next time. You know what I'm saying. I'm out.